On this episode of China Unscripted, how a war could start between the Philippines and China, why the communist utopia is a lie, and a fake Chinese waterfall has gone viral. Welcome to China Unscripted. I'm Chris Chappell.
I'm Shelley Zhang.
And I'm Matt Ganesha.
Today we're going to Shangri-La. That's right. That came from that old James Hilton novel, Event Horizon, about a peaceful valley where they open up a portal to hell.
Is that the origin of Shangri-La?
I might be mixing some things up, smashing some things together.
There was actually a city in Yunnan province that they named Shangri-La. I was there in 2002, and it was called, I think, Zhongdian. It was like this Tibetan, very idyllic Tibetan town, but in Yunnan province. So it was Tibet, but it was outside of the Tibetan Autonomous Prefecture. And it was beautiful, like green hills and like Tibetan people and colors and horses and these great temples. And like, it was amazing. And then like, it wasn't touristy at all. There was one hostel for foreigners and like, it was not clean, but
It did sound kind of like paradise until you got to that point.
Yeah. Well, it was one of those places where like, the toilets were just like holes and there was no barriers or anything. And they were right across from the showers. It was very awkward.
That's great. I mean, I think Shangri-La would be about tearing down barriers between people.
Yeah, and it really did. But I still had a great time, and it was very beautiful. And I thought, well, yeah, I mean, of all the places I was in China, Zhongdian is the least bad to name Shangri-La.
You said it was Tibetan?
Yes.
Yeah. So Shangri-La, I guess, and according to that book you were talking about, is like a Tibetan
Event Horizon.
Tibetan paradise, right? So then, but in a weird way, it's kind of like the CCP co-opting like a
Tibetan culture. Yeah, but they do that for every culture, right?
Well, when I think of Shangri-La, this idyllic paradise hidden away, I obviously think of military defense conferences
in Singapore.
It
is weird that they call it the Shangri-La dialogue.
I wish I had an explanation for that, but they just held the specifically Shangri-La Defense Forum in Singapore. And yeah, I have no idea why they call it Shangri-La.
I bet we could find out with Wikipedia. I don't know.
How about if you find out, you leave your comments below?
Okay.
Yeah. But yeah, this is a big defense conference, and a lot of different countries showed up. I mean, obviously, the U.S. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin was there. He didn't go missing this time, just mysteriously for days at a time.
I'm sure he's feeling great now.
Yeah. I mean, Shangri-La. There was also, the Philippines was there. Volodymyr Zelensky from Ukraine showed up.
Yeah, that was unusual because it was like, I think that was the thing that made the biggest splash news-wise, is that Zelensky showed up.
Well, to me, what should have made the biggest splash is what the Philippines did. But we'll get into each of those as we go along. I guess, since we're in America, we'll do the America thing first. Talk about Lloyd Austin, who was very interesting. He made a point of saying that war with China is not imminent or inevitable, which was an interesting thing to like really make a point of saying. And like, I guess in a way it's technically true. I hope. I don't think it's necessarily inevitable. But it's still, he's very much of like, we need to have talks. Because if we have talks, we won't have war.
I mean,
well,
is he going to come out and be like, well, we're headed toward war, guys?
Well, he just didn't have to say anything, right?
Right. Well,
no, I think essentially like the biggest thing that looms over this dialogue every year is the U.S. and China.
Oh, of course.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I would offer a slightly different perspective, which, Lloyd Austin, if you're watching this, obviously this is for you. From the Chinese Communist Party's perspective, they are already at war with the United States. And so to say it's, not inevitable, it's clearly inevitable because it's happening now, but it's a one-sided war because they're using, better than anyone, gray zone tactics and non-combat type warfare. So, and in particular, the Communist Party sees themselves internally. If you read their internal messaging and white papers and stuff, they see themselves as continually at war with the United States. And so this is a, more broadly speaking, failure of our military to understand the non-military means in which this warfare is happening. The things obviously we talked about on the show: media warfare, propaganda warfare, drug warfare, economic warfare, you name it. The warfares are there.
Well, you already named it, Matt. But yeah, that's a very good point. And this is a consistent failure of many U.S. administrations, that the failure to recognize that we are already at war, just because it's not a kinetic warfare.
I would be interested to know how they internally talk about this.
Who?
You know,
Which
like
internally?
the U.S. government. Like, do you know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Well, I mean, like, we've spoken to plenty of people who have been in that world, and there is usually some degree of disagreement.
Yes, that's
and then
true.
there's an overriding voice that says, no, this is what the message will be.
But I think it's also true that, like, it's usually the Department of Defense and the military side that is more alert to like these different warfares that Matt's talked about versus like the diplomacy side, like the State Department, or probably even worse is the Treasury, like the
Commerce.
Like, commerce has actually been all right because a lot of the sanctions against China have actually come through commerce. So, like,
It's true, and
the trade
blacklists.
representative and things like that. So I think they've actually had to have like a tougher stance than Treasury, which is like, even under the Trump administration, like, Treasury was the one that seemed to be most like accommodating, appeasement focused. I mean, Steve Mnuchin did, produce movies with Chinese production companies. So,
Oh, that's right. Can you remember any specific one off the top of your head?
like the movie? What?
Well, I know he was executive producer of the first Wonder Woman movie, but I don't remember if that was
Legendary Pictures involved with Wonder Woman?
No,
I can't
that's
remember.
that's the part I don't remember.
Yeah.
Legendary was involved with Dune, which we just
Oh, right.
recently
Yeah, we
saw.
watched Dune like
Part
the
2,
other
yeah.
week, and it was like, first thing that comes on screen is Legendary.
Yeah, if you didn't know, China.
Yeah.
China. I like the movie, though. Did you? You never read the books. We'll take a quick detour to talk about Dune, and we'll tie it back to defense.
I did like it. I thought the second one was more understandable than the first one.
Yeah.
Because the first one, I just remember always having to be like, Chris, what are they talking about? Yeah. So the second one seemed to be more understandable, even to someone who hasn't read the books.
Yeah. Yeah, like there's these desert guys, and they're fighting these other guys in the desert. Versus, do you know the Kwisatz Haderach and the Bene Gesserit and Ix and the space?
I did still get confused about the Kwisatz Haderach and the
Lisan al-Gaib.
Yes,
The
'cause I was like-
Mahdi and the Muad'Dib.
Yeah, there are two. I was like, are they all this different people, but the same person, but different legends, but the same person? Yeah. Yeah. That was confusing to me because I remember at one point when he was like the Muad'Dib, and I was like, isn't that what they? And you were like, nope, that's
It's a different word.
Yeah.
It's very similar in this made-up language.
Yeah, that was. I was like, I was one of my questions. I was like, did they actually make up full languages for like when they were shouting, like when the oh my gosh, the H Harkonnen. I know.
H people.
Like, I was like, it starts with an H.
Perverts. The degenerates.
The bald guys. They were
They
all
weren't bald
bald.
in the book. That was a fun little addition.
I mean, uniformity of creepiness, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very
I mean,
it was the shaved eyebrows that made it creepy.
Yeah, that reminded me of Dragon Ball Z.
I saw like some interview with Austin Butler, who played like the new young creepy Harkonnen, and he was talking
Fade.
about how it was like because he had to go on to another movie, so he couldn't actually shave his entire head and eyebrows. So like that whole thing was a prosthetic that started right above his eyelids and went all the way back and took 3 hours a day
Oh my god.
to put on.
I mean, they do go through hell a lot of
Yeah,
times.
I mean, like, and also like almost all. I don't know if they did a lot to David Bautista, but the other, like the old governor guy who,
Raban, the Beast Raban.
yeah, he was. But like is that the older guy?
No, that's Baron Vladimir Horn.
Yeah, Baron. I was like, Governor. No, it's Baron. He, like, his actor doesn't look like that either. So, like,
did you know he was based on Baron Trump? That's completely anachronistic.
Baron Trump has 2 R's in his name.
Yeah. There's a weird cult of personality developing around him, but I don't know if I want to deviate from Dune.
Yeah, I mean, we got to focus here on this China Unscripted podcast.
Yeah, we don't want to go off the rails. We want to stay on Dune.
On Dune.
But yeah, good movie. It didn't necessarily leave me feeling hopeful about things.
Oh, if they ever make God Emperor of Dune, it especially won't.
Which one is that?
Well, technically that's the 4th book, but like if they do, that's the God Emperor one. Wait,
yeah.
did I say God
okay.
Emperor? God
yes,
Emperor.
you did.
I just with 4 books, they should make it 8 to 12 movies.
I don't think any franchise is capable of supporting that. Right?
Yeah, and the series gets increasingly weird and unsettling as it goes along.
If you're gonna make a series that's got that many movies, they have to all be very different. Well, like Marvel is kind of the only one that's pulled it off, but it
they're
eventually
not
went off the rails.
Pulling it off.
They're not. I think after Infinity War Part 2, whatever, that's like the end of where everything really fit together. Like there were a couple bad Thor movies, but other than that, like things were actually pretty good and pretty tight. But they were so different, right? They were different character-wise, different stylistically, tonally, they were very different, right? Some were funnier, some were more serious. And like all of that was supported. And that was probably a dozen movies or something, right? But I don't see anyone else pulling that off.
Well, like, I mean, I think we might just be in a very different time for movies now. Like, it was kind of shocking that the new Furiosa Mad Max movie bombed. Because, like, I heard it was actually quite good. I haven't seen it. But
I think, like, all the movies have been kind of bombing this summer.
Yeah. And, I mean, we're at the beginning of, like, summer blockbuster time, so we'll have to see. But, yeah, it's interesting time for movies.
I saw something about how, like, the #1 international movie the other week was the Garfield movie. Which
really, I mean, it bombed here.
It did bomb, and it got a bunch of like 1-star reviews. And I think it wasn't one of those things where the critics didn't like it, but people liked it. It seemed like everyone was like, "This is terrible, just like fake money grab." Apparently, it's very popular in China.
Really? Why?
I don't know.
Explain it.
I don't know.
Explain your people to me, Shelley.
Tell
me of your ways.
I could see that like a very simple like slapstick comedy might translate well in like across cultural barriers, but
Chinese Three Stooges. And then our countries would be united.
Yeah, well, I'm thinking about like I watched this Chinese movie on a plane a few years ago that was it was Stephen Chow's, but it was like about this woman who was not pretty, but she wanted to be an actress.
Yeah, what was that called?
And I can't remember what the movie is called right now. It was like The Last Great something hero. Like, no, not Last Great Action Hero is what but like it's, anyway. But like the humor in it, like there was a lot of kind of like slapsticky.
His stuff does have a lot of slapstick. So, I mean, Kung Fu Hustle was basically Looney Tunes, live action Looney Tunes.
I've never watched Kung Fu Hustle.
I think that's come out on this show before. We need to fix that. Shaolin Soccer, have you seen that?
Nope.
I kind of prefer that one, but we should do you on Kung
like
Fu
that
Hustle.
Was that actress who is the lead in Shaolin Soccer is the one that got in trouble a few years ago. Do you remember this? And like like for taxes, and when they were kind of all like when the CCP was going after a lot of celebrities. Is Fan Bingbing who got the tax evasion thing.
I remember Fan Bingbing,
but. The Kung Fu Hustle actress, I think it was something else that like she kind of disappeared. I don't think she disappeared the same way that Fan Bingbing is, but like there was a huge backlash against her, and she had been so big in like the early 2000s. Like she was the star of Huanzhou Ge, like Princess Returning Pearl, which was the biggest TV show in China for a long time. It was one of those Emperor Qianlong TV shows where it was about this girl who she's like a Beijing orphan, but she becomes friends with this like very pretty, like highly educated girl who was like essentially a byblow of the Qing emperor. Like she was like
byblow,
like a bastard, I guess. Like her mom, like Qianlong was famous for like going to visit the South in disguise, right? Like he supposedly, I don't know how much he actually did versus how much is like the legends of him traveling to the South.
Which is kind of the plot to my favorite kung fu movie, Dirty Ho.
It really?
Yes, it's fantastic. Everyone should watch it. Okay. It's unfortunately named.
There's also Xishuo Qianlong, which is the like, TV series from the 90s.
TV
that's
series.
What you grew up on, right?
I watched that a few years delayed because it was kind of like that was rebroadcast by a California TV station. But yeah, it was like a 1990s series about that. But anyway, so the girl makes friends like this her educated friend is the daughter of Qianlong because her mother had a relationship with Qianlong when he was traveling in the South in disguise, and he meant to like bring her to the, make her a concubine, but didn't, and then she died. And so, but she told her daughter like who her real father was, and like was like, someday you have to go claim your birthright. So she goes to Beijing, makes friends with this like Beijing orphan girl, and then the Beijing orphan girl says that she'll go, because like the other girl's sick, so she'll go claim her birthright for her. And then she goes to the hunting grounds and tries to like flag down the emperor and gets shot with an arrow.
Oh, wow.
And while she's unconscious, they find this scroll that she has that was one that Qianlong wrote for this woman he loved. So everybody assumes that she's the princess.
That she's the one, yeah.
And then she goes to the palace, but because she's, basically an uneducated hick, like hijinks ensue.
Oh, okay.
And now she's got to pretend to be the princess because she's afraid she's going to be beheaded if it comes out that she's lied to the emperor.
But what if she told the truth immediately, like upon waking up? Wouldn't that not?
Yeah, but she didn't.
She didn't there that moment. You can't. Once you start down the dark side,
I think
forever will it dominate.
I think it was actually, it was kind of like presented as like the Qianlong, the emperor, was being like really fatherly toward her, and then like she was an orphan, so she didn't have parents, so she like had this moment of weakness where she was just like, oh, I wish I had a dad, and then she didn't tell him.
Oh, wow. So that's Shangri-La Defence Conference.
Yeah. Wow. So we should probably
you're gonna tie
just
it back in, right?
Is there a way?
To Dune. Okay, we got to go back to Dune.
We got to go back to Dune because we don't have a rocket ship to get out of our rabbit hole.
Now, if only there were a defense conference in Dune.
You mean there's a lot of political maneuvering in Dune.
And there was talks about like, okay, how do we deal with this military problem?
Yeah, I mean, this is a real stretch. Let's just talk about the Shangri-La.
Yes. Thank you for joining us on our little tangent. Welcome back to the show. Yes. So, Matt, you made a great point about that we are already at war, and that is something that needs to be kept in mind, even if our own officials are not saying so.
Yeah, no, I agree. I made a great point.
Yes.
Well, I do think that the more that popular sentiment towards the CCP is like, look, we can't trust them, the more that will empower officials to, take actions.
Yeah. Well, I think it also stands in stark contrast to what the Philippines was saying there, that if China kills a Filipino, I don't know if it was like specifically like a military personnel or just like a Filipino fisherman or whatever, that war could be on the table. And that is very open, strong language coming from the Philippines, which I think it's amazing to see how much their rhetoric towards China has changed over the years.
I mean, I hope that it never comes to that. But if it does come to that, the key will be if the Philippines is drawn a line in the sand, so to speak, are they going to take that military action when it happens, or are they going to back down? And if they back down, then it could be Scarborough Shoal all over again. That is in the 2012 thing that we've talked about repeatedly, but where CCP just knows that it has carte blanche to keep pushing.
Yeah, I think like the good thing about what the Philippines strategy is that it's not like Marcos just came out and said this. You know what I mean? It's like the Philippines has shown since he became president that they are going to steadily push back on the CCP.
Yeah.
So now when they say this, then the CCP's got to be like, oh,
it's a calculation.
then it's a calculation about whether you mean it or not. Versus like if you just come out and bluster, but in your actions you're like appeasing the CCP, then it's more likely that they will just be like, this guy's just blowing hot air.
Yeah.
So,
but yeah, as Matt said, like that is the danger with red lines. Like once you draw a red line, you have to actually act on it.
I think that's what David Stilwell said on our podcast a few years ago.
Yeah,
and it was definitely a good point.
Which unfortunately, like, so if the Philippines and China does come to blow, technically the U.S. has a defense alliance with the Philippines, and that should mean the U.S. gets drawn in. But when asked about that, Defense Lloyd Austin, Secretary Defense,
it's the words are there in some order.
Assemble them yourself.
Yes.
He refused to like comment on that. He's like that's a hypothetical. I don't know. Where our support is ironclad, but not actually going to say like, yeah, we would honor our treaty and actually be there.
Which is funny because like I can imagine Biden making like a stronger stand the way he's said about Taiwan. Like we will come to Taiwan's defense. Right? I mean, he said it like several times.
Kind of said that again. He was like, there was like a recent interview with Time Magazine or something like that, in which he seemed like not quite with it on all things, but
it's these moments of clarity.
But like the Taiwan thing, he tried to kind of negotiate this middle ground where he was like, he was trying to talk about like the U.S. position on Taiwan, but then he was like, we essentially reiterated that if it came to blows that they would defend Taiwan.
Yeah. I just yeah, it's sad because then I'll also see a video like he just was in France for the D-Day celebrations, and there's a point where it really looks like he's just pooping his pants.
Yeah, I mean, I think that this is why I feel like even if President Biden has the correct instincts towards Taiwan, like, I don't know what his administration would actually do.
Yeah.
You know?
And if, he's clear on what he wants to have happen, but doesn't have the physical or mental energy to push that through all the bureaucracy that he has to push it through in order to take military action, then it comes to nothing. Like when his State Department is going to resist him, when the military may or may not resist him, when some portion of the public might resist, when part of Congress might resist, like you have to not only have your convictions as president, but you also have to have the ability to follow through and push against those dissenting voices and say, look, this is the right thing to do, and we're going to do it, and it's going to happen. And you just take all those steps. It's very hard being president to begin with, let alone being 80 and struggling.
I do think that I keep thinking back about what happened with like Nancy Pelosi visiting Taiwan, where like it was clear that there were members of the Biden administration trying to block her.
Yeah.
And then she kind of publicized that in the Washington Post and like,
oh yeah,
and like
that was smart.
That it was kind of like, yeah, I will not go, but President Biden has to call me and tell me in person, like on the phone or whatever. Like he has to tell me that he doesn't want me to go. And then I will also release a statement saying I am not going because President Biden asked me to not go.
Yeah. She drew a red line.
Yes. And then they backed down.
I mean, that's a very smart strategy. And I think that this is a lesson for anyone who's facing pressure to sort of not do something that goes against what the CCP wants. Right? It's like you publicize it. And it's like, when you shine light on it, it actually makes it easier. Like, for example, what the Philippines is doing by shining light on what's happening there. Or like if a company is, say, facing censorship pressure, right? For whatever reason, like a response could be, they make a statement. We've publicly decided to not talk about the 35th anniversary of June 4th, 1989. because we're facing a lot of pressure from our, China-linked advertisers or something. And a company that does that is actually very courageous, and it makes kind of the same statement without maybe technically violating whatever gag order. But you get like what they're doing, right? And so it actually is very helpful.
Yeah, I think the shining a light on it is such an important part, because what the CCP does, and a lot of times, is like really petty and alienates people and kind of unites like other people or countries against them. It's just that when none of that is exposed, everybody feels alone, right? Like all these like small countries, they feel like they're being pressured by the CCP. They don't have anywhere to go to talk about it.
But then Lithuania.
Yeah, or the Philippines, right? Like these countries.
Solomon Islands. Well,
they-
specifically
Malaita.
one premier
Malaita
in
province.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's just like when these things come out, then there's like that makes people understand that this is not just one isolated incident. This is what the CCP does, and then people form alliances based around that. Like there's an entire alliance of Congress people, like MPs, whatever, interparliamentary alliance on China. I think I might have gotten the first word wrong, but like it is like a bunch of different like legislators from different countries that are all standing up to the CCP, and they form this is like a non-government body, right? But like it's like a group where they are all saying like Lithuanian like MPs or UK MPs, like US Congress people, like they all like have like a united stance about the CCP, and they are talking to each other. So even on a like not official government level, but like on a government level that's they're still they're all dealing with the CCP, and they're all talking to each other about how to deal with the CCP.
That's really good and really important too. And I think that can also be driven further by the individual people of a country being aware of the Chinese Communist Party.
No, I think that's definitely true too. I mean, I think I mentioned Zelensky coming, and I think an interesting thing is like Zelensky and Marcos were together, and I think that also like pointedly draws an arrow at China, right? Because like the CCP is propping up Russia, and so the CCP is also threatening the Philippines. So like, and then unspoken here is like, then what does that make people think of as Taiwan?
Yeah, well, since we're talking about Zelensky, he had a great burn on China, but he was there essentially because China, as you said, is supporting Russia a lot. There's a whole range of ways they support, like getting around U.S. sanctions. The UK has said that they are supplying lethal aid. Again, the U.S. has been like, we don't know about that. Please don't force us to do anything, stand up to China. We don't want to.
Even though we previously drew a red line about this.
Yeah, we drew a red line. But like, we'll just pretend like you're not. It's not China selling weapons to Russia. It's Chinese companies selling weapons to Russian companies.
Yeah.
Totally different. We don't have to go to war. We're already at war. Oh, God.
Anyway, Zelensky's burn.
Oh, yeah. Well, let me just make sure I got the entire context. So China is preventing like a good treaty or whatever between Russia and Ukraine, and so Zelensky was like, "This is unfortunate that such a big, independent, powerful country such as China is an instrument in the hands of Putin."
Ooh.
Yeah,
I don't think Xi Jinping's gonna like that.
Although technically, I would disagree with his analysis that China is just the puppet of Russia, because it's definitely the other way around. Russia is so reliant on the CCP now. This is another issue where, like we've said this on the show, that like the CCP is sort of like at the center of the spider web of global terror, communism, not very nice things. Those are words. Put them together however you want.
I mean, they're basically like Brain from Pinky and the Brain.
Then is Putin insane?
Well, I mean, just like the whole like, what are we doing? Trying to take over the world.
Ah, that's what you meant.
Yeah,
okay.
like every night, what are we going to do? Try to take over the world. What are we going to do in the South China Sea? Try to take over the world. What are we going to do in the South Pacific? Try to take over the world.
Yeah, we're a near Arctic country. Let's take over the Arctic.
Yeah.
China's not near the Arctic in any way. But yes, if something is done about the CCP, that solves a lot of the world's problems. If the CCP collapse, like one of the challenges will be make sure that China just doesn't become another Russia, where it's like still a lot of old communist people are in charge and it's very corrupt.
I think that is tough. Like you see a lot of post-communist countries have a fairly tough transition.
Yeah, it depends.
Not all
Some
of
have
them.
done well.
Yeah.
It would be interesting to really dive into what makes one post-communist country do well versus another. I remember hearing at the Oslo Freedom Forum, like maybe it was Sergej Popovich, but anyways, like the sort of like a Nuremberg trial kind of thing where you like purge.
Yeah, if
the
you just
top
let
communist
the
officials.
people still be in power, but
Then
nobody's
they're still in
been
power.
held accountable
there needs to
for
be.
what they did.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm thinking about East Berlin and East Germany and how essentially, like, everything the Stasi did, right? Like, they set up these, like, you could go into the Stasi offices and look up your file
Yeah.
and see what they had on you. Like, it was just, like, kind of all exposed. And I think, yeah, you're right, that would make a huge difference in terms of whether a country is able to recover from the level of kind of like lying and manipulating and like corruption that comes along with the communist system.
Yeah. I mean, how has Ukraine done in the last 30-something years? It's also struggled with a lot of corruption. But they did have like a couple revolutions that, Russian Federation didn't have, where like people are taking to the streets, right?
To try to get a less corrupt,
to try to get a less
terrible
corrupt system.
Although
what's funny is that Zelensky, essentially his political career was kind of based on this show, the TV show where he was like a school teacher who got elected to president because of this clip of him talking about how bad corruption was. And like the whole show is like him, like the comedy show as him as president fighting against this huge corrupt machine, right?
Well, don't you know, Matt? That's disclosure. That's how they do it. They always lay out their plans. The global elite, they lay out their plans in a movie, and so that they get people used to it. Like that's how come there was a movie Contagion that came out, and then there was a pandemic, and that's why they put out Dune, because they're all going to get us addicted to spice, and then we're going to have space worms flying around the planet.
I have to admit, the space worms were kind of cool.
They were kind of cool. They're pretty cool, especially riding space worms.
Was there space worm riding in like the 1980s Dune movie?
Oh yeah, I mean it's in the book. So.
Mm-hmm.
Although they're called sandworms.
Or sandworms, yeah, you're right.
What did we call them?
We said space worms.
Space worms. I mean, they're worms in space. I prefer to call them space worms. I prefer to call everything in space worms. All right, quick digression because this was just so stupid.
Uh-oh.
In the new Star Wars, the Acolyte. God, this was so stupid. There's like one of the main characters, like her job is like on a spaceship, I repair stuff.
Uh-huh.
And so like something happens where like she has to put on her spacesuit and go outside to like fix something.
Uh-huh.
And like part of the spaceship in the vacuum of space is on fire. It's like a little crackling little campfire in the vacuum of space. It looks so terrible.
Is it an oxygenated area of space?
Maybe the oxygen's coming
It's
out of
space
the
fire.
spaceship.
No, it's
yeah.
I mean, you can
space air.
You can I believe the way that they handle rockets in space is that they're injecting oxygen, right, so that the fuel can burn. So if there is a mechanism for that, but the oxygen has to be
Coming
released
from the spaceship.
From the spaceship,
Yeah.
right? Like it's an intentional thing.
But yeah, it did not look like there was like, like some kind of like oxygen release. Because it was just, it's like they put like a little campfire on it. It was just like in one direction. It looked really bad.
doesn't Disney have so much money? What?
Well, you need to have writers intelligent enough to be like, fire in space.
So it also goes up.
Yeah, it goes up in a direction. It looks awful. And this isn't an IP that was based on like bad rubber alien masks, and those look better than this.
I mean, you know, they had the Jim Henson do like Yoda, so.
Yeah,
you know,
I'm thinking like Mos Eisley Cantina, first one where it really was like they raided some Halloween costume store and just.
But I mean, that was a good movie.
Yeah, it was. That was saved in editing, but that's a story for another day.
That is, yeah.
But yeah, that's disclosure. They're telling us that actually space is full of oxygen.
And worms, oxygen and worms.
It's a deadly combination. The global elite are trying.
What were we talking about before disclosure?
Oh, Zelensky, because he was on a TV show.
I think one of the things about that TV show that I can't remember the specific plot line, but it was like he had, as president, like promoted this like local official who he thought was like uncorrupt to head this organization and like root out the corruption. And in the end, it turned out that the local official he appointed, she was actually like the most corrupt of them all.
Disclosure.
Yeah. I mean, it was, I think that just shows some of the frustration people have with dealing with that type of
post-communist government.
Corruption.
Yeah.
Right. And you know, to bring it back, like that's the danger that mainland China faces, is just like the entrenched corruption. And I would say it's the entrenched corruption plus 3 generations under communism, where people there isn't, like, you lose that intergenerational knowledge of like what it's like to be free.
Yeah, I mean, like there was specific campaigns to like propagandize and ideologically educate Chinese people for a decade. That's going to be difficult to get around.
When your grandparents don't even remember what it was like, well, I mean, your grandparents remember now, but like the still, like, it's very difficult to break out of that, and your whole life is just like, if you're under communism for like 20 years, it's much easier.
Well, I mean, also they killed a lot of people. Like, my grandparents are dead now, but like they did technically grow up not under communism, but also there was a lot of bad stuff happening in China at the time.
Oh yeah.
Like I think a big thing that the communists did was that they like killed the intellectual class, right?
Yeah.
So I mean, my grandparents were like mostly peasant farmers and miners. Like they're not like people who are thinking about how to like have a just government. You know what I mean?
Upholding the culture.
They're just people trying to survive. And so if you kill the people who are the ones who are thinking about like how do you have a just government, or like we're part of like these student movements to try to like get accountability from the government or whatever, then essentially you've killed all the people who were willing to stand up and be like, you know, the same thing with, I guess, Tiananmen Square, right? Like one thing that happened was they didn't just like massacre like idealistic students. They killed people who were trying to demand better from their government, and then essentially scared everybody else into never demanding anything from their government.
They massacred hope.
Yeah. I mean, I guess in a way. It's interesting how the CCP still now, 35 years later, has to like lie about what happened, and they cannot let people commemorate the massacre. They still are putting out a lot of misinformation about how there was no massacre. Like, because it's called the Tiananmen Square Massacre.
There was no massacre, but also the students attacked first.
And most of the people who died were soldiers, actually.
Yeah. Actually.
So, but like there's some technicalities. Like most people in the square were not massacred, but a lot of people were killed in the like Changsha Avenue, like the avenues around the square. And so they can go around being like, there was nobody killed in the square, but there were people killed.
Asterisks.
Technically not in the square. But yeah, I remember, I think we had played a few years ago news package from a BBC journalist who was in like Beijing the night that the soldiers like started like attacking the students, and then like there are gunshots, there are people running by with like dead people on the back of bicycles, like you can see like the scene in the hospital with like all these people lying in the hallways and things like that, and it's like, yeah, that's the kind of stuff that the CCP would rather you not remember.
Yeah, and we see that being enacted in Hong Kong, where it used to be that Hong Kong was the only place in China that you could commemorate the Tiananmen Square massacre. But ever since the national security law, that's been completely clamped down on. There was what was his name? Sanmu Chen? I'm forgetting.
The artist?
The artist. So there was like this, older artist. And all he did was he signed in the air the date of the massacre. And then the police are like, come and grab him. And like he's essentially waving his hand in the air. And like you can't do that in Hong Kong anymore. And then meanwhile, like the pro-Beijing people had like a nice little festival in Victoria Park where they used to have a commemoration.
Yeah.
Which we went to one there, didn't we?
No. Because we got there June like 10th or 11th or 12th or something like that.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah. We didn't go.
We went to a different
We've been to many protests in
Victoria
Victoria Park, but not that one.
We won't
that
anymore.
one did get like, because like that, like the commemoration had been getting smaller and smaller every year, but that year there were like over 150,000 people at that commemorate, and that was kind of the build up to, that's like a sign that there was going to be a lot of people in the streets. But yeah, June 9th was the day that technically the first 1 million person march in Hong Kong.
That's right.
Yep. I mean, yeah, I saw a cartoon by a Hong Kong artist that was essentially about this issue about like people not being able to commemorate Tiananmen Square, and then it showed a bunch of like people, because like people used to light candles at this candlelight vigil, right? And then it showed a bunch of people like kind of like with their heads bowed, and like it was like gray dystopian looking, but each person had like a little candle burning inside their heart, like inside their chest where like the police couldn't see it, essentially. So it was kind of like the police trying to crack down on anybody like materially on the outside commemorating it, but like in everybody's heart there was still a candle burning.
Art can say things.
Yes.
You can't say with words.
Maybe we can show, find that and show it, so I'm not just narrating with it. But for the people who listen to our podcast,
Yes, that's right. There are people who just listen to the audio only version, not on YouTube.
And they have no idea what we look like.
Yes, they're their only exposure to us. Not our bigger YouTube channel, yeah. But I think this is an interesting thing you bring up, because you also sent me earlier this week an interview with Javier Milei.
Oh yeah, that was interesting. Yeah,
and his take. Well, yeah, tell us about that, because I thought it was a very interesting point he made about communism, socialism. Because as you mentioned, when your grandparents, China wasn't great before the communists took over. And they didn't make it better.
No. I mean, I think what was interesting to me about Milei's interview was like, I mean, he's very kind of all over the place politically. He's like, I'm an anarcho-capitalist. I'm a libertarian. So a lot of his interview was about like why libertarians need to step up and get into government so they can dismantle the government. So he's got a lot of interesting political ideas, but he's very against socialism and communism. And the point he was making that I thought was interesting was that he talked about how socialism essentially relies on the worst human values, about like envy and hatred, and how essentially they use that as a motivator for people, right? So I was thinking about how like the thing that makes communism appealing to a lot of people is that idea, like the kind of John Lennon Imagine song idea, where it's like everybody is like living in peace and harmony and we're sharing everything. But like the way that they get there is by weaponizing like oppression, like this idea that like hatred against groups of people, the idea that you need to like fight and essentially like... How do you get everybody to share anybody in peace? Like you have to first conquer the world,
kill anyone who doesn't want to.
And so it's just like, how can you possibly get to this utopia if you do it by essentially murdering and stealing? Like it's
And that's even there in the John Lennon song, if you think about it for a bit. Like, imagine no possessions. It's like, okay, what happens to my possessions? How do we go from this to that? Well, imagine no religion. Okay, now hold on there. I like my religion. What are you gonna do?
Yeah, so it's just kind of like but it's got a beautiful tune.
Yeah,
and that's
celebrities sing it.
I do that during the pandemic in a very tone deaf way, but I do think that is, in a way, a metaphor for like that song sounds really nice. I always get irritated every time like the ball drops in Times Square on New Year's Eve. And then like after the ball drops, they play like 2 bars of New York, New York. Mm-hmm. And then they immediately launch into somebody singing Imagine.
It's because it's the rituals being enacted to summon this world, Shelley.
Uh-huh.
Rituals have magic.
Well, it's interesting that in a way, like, there are a lot of rituals that come with communism or like communist systems, right? Like these rituals of you must like the kids in the morning go and then like they raise the flag and then like you sing a song about the communist without the Communist Party there's no new China, and like you have like your red scarves that you all wear to show that you're like a good like little communist youth league member. And like all these things, but like communism is atheist and doesn't believe in religion.
Right, but I mean, communism is itself, I mean, by an external definition, it is a type of religion, right? Because there's a certain belief you have to adhere to, right? That there is no God but the Communist Party.
Well, and in particular, that there is like this utopian vision that you have to do things to work towards, and you can be part of the elect. And then part of the ones who don't get to be a part of that.
Are you saying that Presbyterianism is communism?
Don't put words in my mouth.
But like
I was
communist
kidding.
officials are essentially the clergy.
So let me tell you why Lutheranism is the beginning of communism.
Oh, no.
Sorry, my 7 years in Catholic school.
It all started with the 95 Theses. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's the only thing I really remember about Martin Luther, is that he nailed the 95 Theses to the door of the church.
Yep. And it is interesting, like, because since we're talking about this, like people will put like, oh, the Bible, it's like Jesus was communist, and they like point to like there's this period at the very beginning of the early church in like Acts of the Apostles where it talks about how they all shared everything amongst themselves. And number one, that was like this godly state that they all volunteered for. It wasn't like somebody was like, you have to give us all your stuff. Mm-hmm. And also immediately it created problems. Because some people weren't getting the same as others.
Oh.
Like immediately that's what happens in this unified spiritual community that like, even not without the guns. Like, so like imagine.
Yeah.
All the people.
Right.
I mean, I've known people who like lived in communes or kibbutzes, and it's often very dysfunctional. And so if it's dysfunctional on a like 30 people level or 100 people level, like as a country, it's a nightmare.
Yeah, I mean it's hard enough for like 2 people in a college dorm to share chores.
Did you have problems with your roommate?
Why do you say that, Matt? So how do you create a perfect society? Why? Let's read Plato's Republic and be horrified.
Well, I mean, I think that what I recognize is that there isn't necessarily a perfect solution, right? I mean, my ideal would be a free market, but there are still problems that come with it. But you have to recognize that the alternative to a free market is an unfree market. And yeah, there's a spectrum there, but like the unfree market is where the government controls the means of productions. The government distributes everything. The government tells everyone what job to have, right? That is the opposite of freedom in the marketplace, and it takes away people's agency. People always end up with less because you can't really create abundance under that system or innovation under that system. And so, communism is the most destructive part, the most destructive way to do it. And the free market, like, recognize the problems and try to take steps to deal with that. and there are some steps, such as allowing lawsuits and certain types of like things that enhance commerce. But it's never going to be equal. And if your ideal is equal, the only way that that's ever been achieved is that everyone is equally poor in abject poverty under communism. And then
not
even
everyone
then,
is
not
poor.
everyone, because some people are more equal than others.
The ones that control the means of production.
Those are the clergy of the communist church. That is the communist officials.
No, I'm thinking about how in certain churches in China they like have put up, photos of Mao and Xi Jinping.
I did think it was interesting. Putin was in China recently, and he went to some Chinese Orthodox church, and there's like a video of them like taking out the iconography of Christ, and like Putin's there and like looking at it. It's very interesting state propaganda. I actually don't know much about the Orthodox Christian church in China, because I know there's a Catholic, the Three Patriotics Association.
Church. Yeah. I wonder. Actually, now I'm like wondering what the Orthodox Church would fall under.
Yeah, because like it shouldn't fall under the Catholic or Protestant ones, because that's Western history right there. But
yeah, but then again, like not all the Protestant denominations should fall under a single, three self-patriotic church.
Wildly different. Yeah,
they are somewhat different, right? Being Baptist or Episcopalian, like there's some similarities, but they're not the same thing.
Yeah, I remember it was like this interesting thing. Bush Senior. I'm gonna mix it up, but like there was like such a divide in the country between like I'm gonna get the denominations wrong, but it was something like there's like the Methodist, which is like the working class, and then there's the Episcopalians, which are like the upper class. I might be getting those specific, like which ones wrong, but basically what Bush had to do was he had to leave his upper crust Protestant denomination, and he joined whatever the middle working class Protestantism was.
That was a long time ago when people cared a lot more about that.
Well, I remember when JFK was running for president, people were like, will a Catholic ever be able to be elected?
Yeah, it was a big thing.
It was a huge thing.
And when Biden was running, that was a non-issue.
Yeah.
Him being Catholic, that is, yeah.
Yeah, well, because I'm so sorry. I immediately went back to Dune because I was thinking, here's my thought process. This is the thought process I have to control whenever I do the show. Because why wasn't it a problem that Biden was Catholic? Well, because like the main thing was he was running against Trump. People called Trump orange. In Dune, there was something called the Orange Catholic Bible. Wait, they didn't get into the movie, but like that's sort of like the future.
It's called the Orange
Catholic Bible.
I didn't know that Catholicism was still around in Dune.
Yeah. I mean, because you don't really see it in like the movies. But so that means this Dune is the elites telling us that Trump and Biden are working together. The Orange Catholic, they're together. They're really in control. The illusion of choice is an illusion.
What kind of frightened me about this is that like, when you walk through that, your thought process, but like actually it happened in like 5 seconds, right? Like when you
quicker than that.
Yeah. So like the connection back to Dune. Mm-hmm. So is Dune your Roman Empire?
I think about Rome more than I think about Dune.
Okay, it's definitely. Just come up a lot today.
Oh, because we just saw them.
Yeah, that's true.
Maybe that's the solution. We need the Lisan Al-Gaib, the voice from the outer world, to lead us to paradise, which means bloody
I'm
galactic
not sure
jihad.
that that's the book. The movie wasn't done exactly. Like it didn't show exactly what happened after they went on their jihad, but doesn't seem like it's going to be a good thing.
No, lots of killing.
Yeah,
lots of killing.
Yeah, so I'm not sure. Like the whole looking for a prophet from the outer world's a good way to do it.
I love the part in the movie where he's like, I am not the Messiah. I'm not the Lisan al-Gaib. Oh, the Lisan al-Gaib. He's so modest. He doesn't say he's the Messiah.
Like nothing he will say will convince Javier Bardem that he is not.
Yeah. Which is why I love those memes of where like there's a picture of Paul and he's like, how do you do it?
Like his finger.
Lisan Gaib.
Yeah. Yeah. But then the weird thing about the movie for me, and now I'm gonna go on a tangent, is like after he was able to like he drank that poison and was able to see the future, like it was like his motivation as a character completely disappeared because now he's just like he knows what he's supposed to do. And he's like, okay, now I am going to lead this jihad, and he's like, yeah, like, I don't care if this woman I love is going to hate me. She'll come around. And like,
because he knows she will.
Yeah, and it just seems so bizarre because then like, he turned into like something that was like not human anymore.
Yeah. I actually really liked how they handled it as opposed to like previous adaptations, because a lot of the adaptations like try to portray like somehow how he is seeing like all of the different paths of the future and like, but in this movie, it was just very, very abrupt. It's like he drinks this and then he comes back and he's just a totally different person. He's yelling at everybody. I am the thing in your nightmares.
Yeah. And then he's like, okay, he kind of pulled the Doctor Strange where he's like, I can see one future in which we can succeed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And yeah, how he's just like totally different. He's now like this monster. Yeah, I kind of would like to see them do the next.
I think they're supposed to do another one. I guess if they keep doing well, they'll keep doing them. Is there a point where they become like unfilmable, basically?
That's hard to say because, like, I mean, we haven't watched the David Lynch Dune together, and like that was pushing the boundaries of what was possible. So there definitely would have been an argument for a long time that like making Dune is not possible. But I mean, there was like the Sci-Fi Channel's 2000 version. So I think with the modern technology, it could be doable for quite a while until after they finish the God Emperor thing. Then like weird sexual stuff becomes a major plot point. And I don't think anyone wants to see that. The Honored Matress.
Didn't he stop writing them at some point and his like son started writing them?
His did. Don't worry, he wrote a lot of the weird sex stuff.
Okay. So it's canon, is what you're saying.
It's canon, yeah. Yeah, probably what they'll do is, like, after Dune, there is a book called Dune Messiah and Children of Dune. Those, at least what they did with the sci-fi one, is they mixed those into one series, which probably is what they would do, because there's not a whole lot of content in the sequel.
Is it also, like, thousands of pages long, though?
No, it's shorter.
Okay.
It's definitely shorter, and then Children of Dune is pretty long. And then, yeah, I think it's questionable if they would actually make the God Emperor of Dune, where like his son is a giant space worm, not as big as the big worms because he's still like he's still talking to people. He's just bigger than normal people, and a worm, and immortal, and evil. It's weird. It gets weird.
Yeah, that reminds me of like when they were like doing Three Body Problem. I'm like, how are they gonna keep doing these books?
Yeah, I wish. Yeah. Did you ever watch the show?
I haven't.
I have read all 3 books.
Yeah, me too. I would like to see the show, but I haven't because I don't have Netflix.
There's actually 2 versions, right? There's the Netflix version and there's a 10-cent version, which is structured differently because the Chinese version was different because of censorship.
Did we talk about this?
We have talked about the Cultural Revolution.
But that's a whole other can of sandworms.
But yeah, I'm just like, I don't
like
know how they're gonna keep going with it.
Well, I'm trying to think. I don't think there's anything that is too difficult to film.
Yeah, I'm just wondering if it would actually make a good TV show, though. Do you know what I mean?
That is always the challenge because
it's all about like adapt. It's all about like how good and clever your adaptation is, because you can do things that are like it is possible to make an adaptation that is better than the books, or at least as good.
Well,
but
like the Dune movies did take a lot of liberties, and they were all intelligent liberties that made it work as a movie.
Right. So yeah, I mean, I guess we'll just have to wait and see. Maybe we should just all watch Three Body Problem on Netflix together.
We should, and the original Dune and Kung Fu Hustle.
All right, long day ahead of us, so we better wrap it up.
And like a crazy emotional spectrum on those.
Yeah. I mean, I have to admit the reason I haven't watched Three Body Problem is because I'm not sure I can handle the Cultural Revolution scene in the beginning.
Oh.
The hits a little close to home. Yeah.
Yeah. The sequel, Dark Forest, I think is one of my favorite science fiction books ever. Horribly dark and depressing. Interesting, like analyzing it from like the perspective of like this came out of a communist society.
Yeah.
Well, I'm not making any more giant leaps of logic and connection. I kind of like my analysis of the Orange Catholic thing. There was just Frank Herbert was just telling us what was going to happen with Trump and Biden. That's why for the rest of our lives, the election will just be Biden versus Trump every election cycle. The Orange Catholic. This is brilliant stuff. This is why you watch China Unscripted.
I thought people watched for the Jesus Christ Superstar reenactment.
You know, I didn't talk about it, but one of my other favorite musicals is Assassins, which is about all the presidential assassins. Or would-be assassins, because otherwise it wouldn't be that long.
Yeah.
I was supposed to watch that in college, but then 9/11 happened.
Oh, yeah.
And they canceled that revival.
Yeah, because there's a part where like this guy who wanted to assassinate Nixon wanted to fly a plane into the White House, I believe. And yeah, that was not a story people wanted to hear.
No.
Post 9/11.
No. Yeah. Yeah. But I did read the book. I mean, the book of the musical.
You read a musical.
Yeah,
That's
I read
the most Shelley thing I could possibly imagine.
It was for a class. And this is probably a very Shelley class, but it was a class that was about adapting like real life events into like plays. Mm-hmm. So we read like Arcadia because like Lord Byron is like a character that's off screen in this play. We read Assassins for obvious reasons. We read 1776. We read like M. Butterfly by David Henry Hwang, which was based on that French diplomat who was seduced by this Chinese spy who turned out to be not just a spy but also a man and not a woman.
That's a weird one.
Yeah, it's a weird one. Like so there, I can't remember all of the ones that we read, but like, so these all had in common that they were adapting something that happened into a play or a musical and then seeing how they did it.
So you've never heard the music from Assassin?
I don't think I have heard the music from
Do you want to hear me recite the entirety?
How did you come across Assassins? Because it's not like, I don't think it was a big musical, right?
I don't know.
Did you tell me that your high school did not perform Assassins?
They did not. Oh man, that would have been great. Oh,
can you imagine? Like,
I'm playing Lee Harvey Oswald.
Yeah. I do remember that Lee Harvey Oswald was like a sympathetic character in Assassins.
Yeah, it's a weird musical.
Yeah. It's also very meta in a way, right? Because like the assassins all come and talk to Lee Harvey, like him.
Yeah, and like all the ghosts of and the future would-be assassins like come to him and are like, you must do this. It's weird.
It is, yeah.
Hey pal, feeling blue. Don't know what to do. Hey pal, I mean you. Yeah. Come here and kill a president.
Who was the guy who wrote the music?
I don't know.
It was a big name in musicals, and I can't remember his name right now, and I'm going to look it up because it's going to bother me.
Leonard Bernstein.
Stephen Sondheim.
Oh, Sondheim. There we go. Yeah, that's probably why. Yeah. All right. Well, I'll spare you singing the entirety of the Assassins soundtrack. You'll just have to imagine it yourself. But there is one other story we want to talk about before we go.
The top China news story, as we record this podcast.
You know, China has a reputation for having some things that are fake.
Yeah.
Including, apparently, the biggest waterfall.
Yes, the longest uninterrupted waterfall in China.
Yeah, a guy climbed to the top of it and saw it was just water spewing out of a pipe.
Yeah, and then he took this video of the water spewing out of the pipe. And so it made a huge... There's like
splash.
A huge splash on the internet. There was like a big backlash, right, about how could this, waterfall that's like is supposed to be this like great natural, wonder is actually
Its
water
reputation has fallen so far.
being piped out of. God, I see what she did there. Yeah. But so then the people who were running the tourist attraction of the waterfall came out and were like, we just put it in so that there would be a waterfall during the dry season. Like, there is a real waterfall here, but it just dries up. So to make sure that people aren't disappointed if they come during the dry season, we decided to like pipe more water.
Instead of just it being a seasonal attraction.
Yeah, instead of being a seasonal attraction. Like, the whole story just seems peak China in a way, because it's also like, okay, then it became a big enough backlash that local officials had to come and investigate. Like, you know what I mean? Like, the government...
Imagine being that official. It's a pipe. Found it.
Yeah, it's just like the idea that like they have to come
Detective
to
D.
make sure that like the people know that the government is doing something about this.
We're in charge.
And what it reminds me of is in 2008, ahead of the Beijing Summer Olympics, the party officials were spraying grass with green spray paint to make it greener. And it's like the same excuse, like, oh, it's naturally grass there. We're just enhancing it a little bit. But like, you're spray painting it. Like, that's not grass. And this is the same thing. And I think what's interesting about why is there a public backlash is because people are frustrated with a lot of the like two-facedness of the party and what party officials do. But this is an instance where it's not political.
Right, it's a waterfall.
Right.
And it wasn't like the local government effed up. It was like the people who were...
So there can be a scapegoat.
Yeah.
But it's venting this pent-up anger at this like
kind
lying
of like,
two-faced system.
Yeah, like the fakery of Chinese society that a lot of people don't like. Like, Chinese people don't like buying counterfeit stuff. You know what I mean?
It's melamine like, tainted milk.
Yeah, like the melamine milk. Like there was like a bunch of food scares after that about like fake rice or fake, like.
And it still goes on today.
Like
sewer, gutter oil.
Yeah, so there's just like, but like things like gutter oil, the CCP take care of because it's reputationally damaging but like people still don't trust, that like it's not gutter oil that's just been like filtered gutter oil or whatever, because there were videos of how people would filter it. And it's just like, okay, nobody likes living in the society where
you can't trust anyone.
You can't trust anyone. You can't like... Everybody seems to out to get to each other because that's
Imagine
how,
all the people
living there in fear.
Lying to each other and cheating each other.
Yeah.
To get their own because they've grown up in an environment of scarcity because the government has taken everything from them.
Yeah, which I think is something to draw out. Like, there is not like something fundamentally wrong with the Chinese people. This is a result of a communist system.
And it takes a long time to detox from it. I don't know if that's the right word for it, but like even when you get to like a free society, I think I may have told this story before about how my parents, when I was a kid, would tell me never tell anybody outside the family anything that we do inside the family. And it wasn't like they were secretly beating me or something like that. It was because they were afraid that like anything could be weaponized by people, because that is how they grew up in China. Like,
really, anything can be weaponized.
Yeah. So it was just like that paranoia just takes a long time to get rid of, and so does even like the weird way you think about things, where like you think that you don't just think that everyone's out to get you, but also you tend to think of like human relationships as very transactional in a certain sense, where like you're just like, how can I not be the one that is the loser in this situation? Because if I'm not trying to cheat this person's trying to cheat me.
And if you understand that attitude, you'll understand Dark Forest very well.
So yeah, it is interesting to see like the cultural things that come out of like a society that's been under communism, and like a lot of this stuff is like stuff that you cannot maybe say outright in a certain way. So it can come out in art. Yeah.
And public reactions to incidents like the waterfall.
Yeah, that's
right.
Yeah, I think that's like People are fed up.
Yeah.
And it's a small thing, so it's not like, I mean, I'm not saying that like this waterfall situation makes it seem like the Chinese people like hate the CCP. Like that's not really.
But they hate to varying degrees the system that they are stuck in. Maybe in some cases without recognizing that the original source is fed through a pipe in Zhongnanhai.
That's a metaphor, but not a simile.
No.
Art, it is a powerful thing. Like in Assassins, where there's a love song about Marilyn Manson. It's a wild musical.
Marilyn Monroe?
Marilyn
Manson, the 90s person.
No. The other Manson, the serial killer.
Charles
Manson. It's a musical, a love song to Charles Manson.
Okay.
Is that more weird or less weird?
I forgot about that one. Yeah, I suppose it is less weird than a love song to Marilyn Manson, but more weird than a love song to Marilyn Monroe.
Yes. Lots of people liked her.
Yes. Some presidents included.
All right.
A lot of swipes at JFK today, man. You really took aim.
No, I just said he was under fire for being Catholic. I didn't personally blame him for being Catholic.
Well, that's Oswald I can take.
Oh my god.
Oh my god. Lee Harvey. That something made sense in my mind.
You should leave this alone.
What? Leave this alone.
He said Lee
Harvey.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And this is one for the booths. Shoot, boom. Wow.
History booths.
That really, we didn't land this one. I apologize.
There we go. Didn't land it. Good one.
What?
Are you thinking about John Wilkes Booth?
Because he jumped
leaping
onto the
off
stage
the balcony onto the stage
and sprained his ankle or something?
Yeah.
Oh no,
he
I wasn't.
broke his leg or broke his ankle or something.
Yeah.
Sic Semper Tyrannis. We'll see you next time on China Unscripted. I'm Chris Chappell.
I'm Shelley Zhang.
And I'm Matt Gnezda.
We'll talk to you next time.